This series on intuitive electronics will touch upon the various topics in the wide field of electronics over several lectures. This is the first lecture, which gives an overview of the topics that will be dealt with in this series. So, what is so intuitive about this course? So, we are going to have a number of demos, some animations, some experiments for you to see, and all this will give you a feel for the subject. That is what we intend to do, and we want you to experience it, right? Not just, we would encourage you to really do some experiments at home also using your electronics. You can use an Arduino or some boards which are available easily and do some experiments, start doing some experiments. So we are not really focused on accumulating knowledge in your head. We want you to learn through instinct and get a feel for the subject. So in this course, this is a course on electronics, right? And a major star of this electronics is the electron. So we will be seeing first how electron flow happens, how you can control the flow of electrons, and this leads to number of applications, like you can do logical operations, you can do amplification of the signal, you can do automation, etc. Then the third thing is storage. You can store information, you can store energy. So these are the 3 points that I want to bring about how, from the physics of uh, working of an electron, we can really understand electronics in a better way. And the medium through which an electron flows could be matter or vacuum. Cathode rays. Cathode rays were found to have consist of electrons. And J.J. Thomson did an experiment in 1897 to show the presence of electrons in matter. Before, we thought there were just atoms and you can't have anything even smaller than atoms. But then we found that there was something called electrons also, which are even smaller than atoms. So then these electrons are negatively charged particles. The flow of them was attributed to current that happens in our conductors. So we could control the flow of electrons with a device called an vacuum tube. And these vacuum tubes were the main component of most of the electronics till the 1950s. The computers, the radio, amplifiers, everything were made of these vacuum tubes. So this was in 1906. So then the second major predecessor to electronics was really wireless communication. So they were trying for wireless communication. How can you communicate without any wires? So J.C. Bose, he demonstrated wireless communication through microwaves, and he sent a signal across 75 feet distance, and he rang a bell through 75 feet of distance remotely. That was the first instance of remote control, I think, in this world. And he ignited some gunpowder also, and people were amazed. This was in Kolkata in 1895, very long time back. So then he used some very interesting devices, he made something called a coherer, which was then used also. A similar kind of device was used by Marconi in his first transatlantic radio transmission. So this wireless communication, and he used these triodes, these vacuum tubes, for amplifying the signal and all. So radio transmission and various applications were later found for these electron tubes, as they were called. And so the term electronics really came through these electron tubes where we could control the flow of electrons. And how it was really made famous, or how the term became widespread, was when a magazine by not Tata, sorry, by McGraw-Hill Publications was published in 1930. And as you can see from this, it consists of the major star is the electron tube. And this electron tube, you should know, the electrons are flowing through vacuum. So there's really no hindrance for the electrons. And they had various applications. In 1930, after World War One, in World War One, radio technology really came up. So the first application that you see here is the radio. Then sound pictures, of course, your movies. Then television, broadcasting used to happen. I guess, I'm not sure, but when it really started, but this was the 1930s. So a lot of applications were there. So the amplifiers, phonographs, you can see a lot of applications even by 1930. And electronics came to be associated with these applications because of this magazine. And of course, in World War II, then we had the ENIAC computer, which decoded the German codes as such. And replacing a bad tube meant 19,000 possibilities. So this vacuum tube was really cumbersome. It was huge in size. It needed a lot of power. Just to control the flow of electrons, you needed a lot of power. It could go bad. Vacuum means making them also is difficult. Any small crack in them will lead to a bad tube. So then what happened? Till World War II, we saw electron flow is being controlled in vacuum with the triode vacuum tubes. Then in 1947 came the turning point, or the transistor. So electrons could be controlled in the solid state material. So now we are going from vacuum to the solid state. How electrons will flow in the solid, in a crystal, or what we know now as the semiconductor. So the semiconductor crystals, you could control the flow of electrons, and we'll see that how that really happens. So there we have this transistor. It was discovered in 1947 in Bell Labs by these three people, Shockley, Bardeen, and Brattain. And you can see it was the turning point basically, because now you don't need vacuum tubes, cumbersome devices. You can make your electron flow through very small ICs which can control the flow of electrons. So this is one IC you can see here rotating. So you can control the flow of electrons and then do a lot of stuff with it using these ICs. So electrons now are flowing through a solid. So there are atoms, right? In a solid, there are atoms. So how an electron interacts with the atoms is very important. That determines the energy of the electron. And depending on what the energy of the electron is, it could be tightly bound to the atom or it could be free. So that is how we control the flow of electrons. If it is free, we can easily move it about with by applying some voltage. If it is tightly bound, it is more difficult to move it about. So that controls the flow. So we'll see how this happens and how it has evolved. So for to know this, first we look at the flow of electrons in a vacuum tube. We'll see how it has evolved from a vacuum tube to a semiconductor device. So in a vacuum tube, you have three electrodes, okay? The cathode and the anode. So the current flows from the electrons flow from cathode to anode normally. So we'll see that happening. So you can see the current is flowing from cathode to anode when we apply some voltage. Electrons are flowing great. You can do a lot of stuff with it. But now we want to control the flow of electrons. So what could you do? So what they normally do is that apply a third electrode, which is a control grid, and they apply some voltage to the grid. So it allows electrons to pass through it. It is kind of like uh, permeable to electrons only. So it allows electrons to pass, but we apply some voltage, negative voltage, and this slows down the electrons. And then we can control the flow of electrons. So like this, a three-terminal device, we can control electrons flow. But we need a vacuum, and in a vacuum there is really not much. Vacuum is empty, so there is no hindrance to the electrons as such. So then what we have, we need to make electrons flow through metals. Of course we know it flows through metals, but we can't control the flow through metals that easily. How do we control the flow? So the three people, Shockley, Bardeen and Brettain, they discovered or they invented the transistor, the bipolar junction transistor. So in this transistor, it is basically a solid state device. So there are three parts: an emitter, a base and a collector. It's similar to this vacuum tube. So emitter is like the cathode, base is something like the control grid, and collector is the anode. So you can understand, right? This emits the electrons, this collects the electrons, and base is what you use to control the thing flow. So what happens is, normally when we apply a voltage between emitter and collector, current won't flow because there is a barrier kind of over here. This base acts like a barrier. It's made of a different type of material. So when you apply a voltage, there is like a barrier or a hill for the electrons to climb. This is the energy levels. So here energy is low, here energy is high. So it needs to cross this barrier. Only highly energetic electrons can cross this barrier. So this material causes the barrier. Okay. Now let's see what happens when we apply some voltage to the base with respect to the emitter. So when we apply some positive voltage to the base, this barrier is uplifted. So it goes up. So now it's like you're removing the barrier. You're making the electrons flow from emitter to collector. So this is how now from off it became on. So initially it was not flowing, now your current is flowing, right? Now we want to control the flow of current also, right? You want to make it faster or slower. So what you do is just you change it, the voltage to less positive, sorry. Once you make it less positive, you can make it go slower or control the flow rate. So this is how a transistor works. So by controlling the flow rate, you can do a lot of stuff. So control the slow flow rate, you can do logical operations, like when something is on, then only you make let some task to occur. So it's like logical operations. So, and the data you can represent by 0 and 1, 0 and 1s, that you know, right? And then you can do computations, you can do a lot of stuff. So the transistor is the lifeblood of electronics. So if you see the first transistor, first IC, this is the first IC. It looks a bit crude, right? But then it has evolved. In 1970s, you had 2,300 transistor on the same area, 2,300. And now you have 1.4 billion transistors in the same, almost the same area. So 1.4 billion, can you imagine that? So this is one IC, the circuit that is made on an IC. But now there are unimaginable number of devices on the same die or the same chip. So then we will go to how does this die, how is this die created? So we saw the circuits right on this is called a die. How is this created? So first you take a round wafer of silicon, then you do all sort of processes, lithography, and you flash the circuit onto it. Okay, then you do bonding with the package. So then you get the IC or the packaged IC. So we'll see, this is the final, I mean not the final, I mean this is the wafer that is there, a silicon wafer which has been fabricated. So how is it fabricated? There are number of processes. Basically it's like taking an image on of the circuit onto the wafer. So you burn the circuit on the wafer. Okay, you make an image of the circuit on the wafer, and these images are so small, they are nanometer sized images. Features are nanometer sized. That's why you can have so many billions of transistors. It is because our optics is so good. So the optical engineers have really, you should thank the optical engineers also. They have made it possible. So there are various number of processes which is similar to how you make a photograph. Okay, you have to expose to UV light and dope the wafers. That is the only difference, I guess, doping. So these things we learn in detail later on. But this, as an introduction lecture, we'll just get an overview of all these things. So then packaging, right? So you can see this IC. This is what many of us might have seen. But how does it really work? So first you take the die from the wafer, you cut a die, then you put it the die into the package, you bond the package, then you cover it, put some epoxy resin, all those things, then finally you get this. So you get this IC. So then from the IC, then we have to make our systems. So this is the area of PCB design. So we make a circuit design first, how the components must be connected to each other, how the wires etc. will be there. Then we make the layout, or how the bonds wires will be connected on the board. Then we will place our components on the board, and then we'll do soldering. So all these processes we learn slowly in the coming in the lectures of these intuitive electronics. Then we have to do various other things. You may have to program the board, you may have to test the board, check the outputs. So there are a lot of things involved. So then finally we will conclude with a small video of the complete process that we have seen. Okay, from the cutting of the wafer. So this is the wafer. We flash the circuit onto the wafer and then cut the die. So the die goes into the IC, the integrated circuit package, and then the package goes onto a PCB. Finally, we get a PCB. So that is how our system works. So we will be learning the whole process of electronics in our continuing lectures. I hope you enjoyed or found something interesting in these lectures. Do continue to watch and have a good time. Thank you.